guys, and welcome to Piano and Keyboard Artist, where we discuss the artists related to pianos, keyboards and synthesizers. And today we're talking about Peter Hook from New Order. New Order without Peter Hook. Many of you have asked me over the months, Vaughn, please do a video on New Order. It's a very popular subject here on the YouTube channel and on my Facebook group. And I thought we will do this scratch the surface video on New Order, like an introductory one. But I want to focus on Peter Hook, much like I did one of my very first videos, which kind of went viral, was the this one, Depeche Mode without Alan Wilder. And because there is so much we can talk about within New Order, I want to really just focus this on Peter Hook, because I believe New Order split up in 2007, following a lot of friction and, which is quite well documented. And then they reformed again in 2011 without Peter Hook. Now, I want to hear from you guys, how you feel that has affected New Order. Because if we look at the New Order history, Peter Hook, he was not just the bassist, but Peter Hook really revolutionized the way bass was played within, pop music. And a lot of this comes from, he started quite late. He started at 21, he's young, but, some people start music much earlier in life. But, he walked into a music instrument shop at the age of 21 to buy a bass guitar. And Peter talks about how when he walked in to buy a bass guitar the first time, he never knew the difference between a bass guitar and a regular guitar. The shop owner had to explain the difference to him. But he bought this bass guitar, and bless him, he couldn't even afford a bag for it, a gig bag, so the shopkeeper put it in a bin liner for him. What I'm trying to illustrate is, this is a typical example of humble working class beginnings. I love to hear this. The story of New Order really is the story of a true working class underdog band, that really triumphed. I remember watching a documentary once about Bernard Sumner, and he talked about how when he grew up in Manchester, he grew up in such a rough industrial part of Manchester that I remember him saying he'd never seen, and this was strange, he'd never seen a tree in real life. Like a tree. He'd never seen a tree until he was like 10 years old, because that's just shows how industrial and run down the area was that he lived in. So that really illustrates the humble, non-pretentiousness of this band. They were proper, down-to-earth, working-class band. New Order really also are, to me, a testimony to the saying, where something is greater than the sum of its parts. If we look at the individual members of New Order, Bernard Sumner, he's not a great singer, and I don't mean any disrespect by that, but he is iconic in his role as the front man for New Order. I'll get back to that in a moment. Let's take Gillian. She's not a great keyboard player. Some people say she's worse than Fletch. Steve, drummer, I don't know how good a drummer he is. Is he a good drummer? I don't know. He's good enough for them. Peter Hook, how good a bassist is he? I don't know. I'm not a bass player. The point I'm trying to make here, guys, is, and we see this a lot in bands like the Beatles, and there are so many examples, is where you take the individual members who are not outstanding musicians, as individual members, but you put them together and it becomes greater than the sum of their parts, and you get a magic band. And New Order really were one of those examples where take four people from working class backgrounds, no privileges or airs and graces, and they come together and they form a successful, iconic, legendary band, which people will talk about for years. And to elaborate my point on this, we have a program here in the UK called Strictly Come Dancing. It's a program where, celebrities team up with, professional dancers, and then they learn how to dance, and then it's a big fiasco on TV, and then there's voting and stuff, and not my cup of tea. And the program is pretty much well known for breaking up marriages, because the celebrities join up with these dancers, and then they usually end up having affairs, and anyway, long story. The point I'm trying to illustrate is the production values of the Strictly Come Dancing TV series are phenomenal. It's very, very high budget, and it's very, very slick and polished. Now, as part of the show, they also have a live band, and this is the point I'm trying to make, is if you listen to the live bands within the Strictly Come Dancing TV series, the live bands are incredible. I mean, the musicians are A+ rated. They are, you know, proper session musos. They're those kind of musicians that can sight read music. You know, they can play the instruments in their sleep or behind their back. They're just like the highest quality musicians. And so are the singers. The singers are just incredible. But the point I'm trying to make is, when you listen to the songs that are sung by these great session musicians all coming together with great singers, despite the fact that they technically can perform these songs better than the actual artists that they are covering, the songs lack edge. You know, it's like the songs are so perfectly executed that there is no edge. And this is something I was discussing with Tom Shear from Assemblage 23, and that interview is coming up on my channel soon. Tom and I were discussing how, as a musician, you can get to a point where you are so technically brilliant that you can almost be too unlistenable to a point where you're just so technically flawless. There's no edge. And I hope I'm making myself clear here. I'm not having a go at people who are on that level, because I certainly am not on that level. But this is just something I like to point out to people when I'm coaching them, is that being an artist is so much more than being a flawless musician. I mean, technical singers like Mariah Carey and Celine Dion, you know, even like Michael Bublé, they're what you call great singers, but I'm not a fan of them. And that's no disrespect to them. To me, I'm just not a fan. So if you'll forgive me going on a tangent, I want to bring it back to New Order, and I want to point that out, that New Order are exactly that kind of band. And there are many other examples we can point out, is where the individual members are not incredible, but put them together and you've got magic. The point I'm trying to make is, it's not about the musicality and the ability to play and all that. It is about the unity of musicians coming together to form something special. And that is exactly what New Order is all about. Now, as I say, trying to focus in on Peter Hook now, because I always go off topic. Peter Hook, to me, was kind of like the rock star within New Order. And that's no disrespect to the other members. I just think to me, Peter Hook had the most he has the most sort of charisma. There's just something very charismatic about him. Also, not only the way he plays, and as I say, he did revolutionize the way the bass guitar was played, really, because when he went into the rehearsal rooms and they were playing, it was he couldn't really hear himself, probably because of bad acoustics or bad speaker systems. So what he did was, instead of playing his bass in the lower octaves, which bass is usually played in, he would play the bass a lot higher, in the higher registers. And this is something that resonated with Ian Curtis a lot. And Ian Curtis kind of went, carry on doing that. And that really became the part of the iconic sound of New Order, which was, you know, the Peter Hook bass, which is played a lot higher up in the register. In fact, the Love Will Tear Us Apart, love will tear us apart again, that melody was inspired by Peter Hook on the bass. When Peter went... So if you listen to Love Will Tear Us Apart, it's that doom do doom doom do doom do 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 do. So it was really that melody that Peter Hook played in the bass that inspired Ian to sing that love will tear us apart again. And this is the interesting thing about Peter Hook's bass playing, is that it's not typical bass playing where it's like providing the groove and the foundation of the song. He provides a lot of the melodic elements to the song, almost like a guitarist would. It's always sad to see bands like New Order fragmenting. And I mean, this is a typical story of many bands. You know, you take creative souls and you put them together. Not only is there the human element, but of course there's the drug and alcohol element as well, and the whole bizarre lifestyle which goes with being an artist of that level. And you will clash and people will fall out, and it's very difficult to keep acts together. But I believe a lot of the fallouts came because of tension between Bernie and Peter, and I think some of the tensions were really because I think Bernard got so focused on making the perfect album and using lots of different producers and spending a lot of time in the studio, whereas Peter just wanted to go out and perform. And I think they were spending so much time in the studio and less on the road. And this is where I think a lot of the friction came. And I believe that Gillian and Steve kind of stayed out of the rift, and most of the tension was from Peter and Bernard. And I can see the frustration. And Peter Hook did go on to say that he was getting annoyed that I think Bernard, just being a typical artist, wanted to up the ante and wanted to make his product as best as possible. And that's perfectly understandable. That's just the artist's curse. You want to make things better and better. But as a result, I think they would, instead of making albums in 6 days, like I believe one of their first albums was made in 6 days, now they were spending up to 2 years, maybe 3 years on an album. And this just wasn't sitting right with Peter. Peter got annoyed, and he was also saying that, you're using too many different producers, and a lot of these producers, were not as good at making the records as what they, New Order, themselves were. So I think if Peter had it his own way, he would have preferred them to sort of, focus more on producing themselves and gone for a more sort of like a rougher edge. And this is something that I think we all fall prey to, especially as, producers and self-producing people, is you try to make your music so good, and then you get to a point where you engineer the essence out of it. And I really feel, judging on the interviews that I've seen, that this is probably one of the big fallouts. That was probably because of Bernard just wanting to make the records better and better and better, and Peter just wanting to get out there and kick ass. Now, we can't speak about New Order and not speak about Blue Monday, which was the biggest selling 12-inch of all times. A huge subject, and we can make a whole video on that subject alone. But an interesting thing was that, I think when they were selling it, I think because of the production costs and the sleeve design and whatever, they were losing money. I think they were losing about 10 pence per unit. So they lost money with it. But it is the biggest selling 12-inch of all times. But what's interesting as well is that some people talk about the sequencer and the drum machine being the enemy of bassists and guitarists, because it is probably quite convenient. You get a drum machine and you don't have to deal with a drummer. But this is where New Order were brilliant. They incorporated electronic music into their music in a very natural way. And the way it came about was, I believe, Blue Monday was originally just like a instrumental track, which they would put at the end of their sets, when they had an encore. So they've done the end of the set and they walk off the stage and they'd go for a drink, and then they would leave the sequencer to play. And that was the idea behind Blue Monday, as far as I'm aware. And as legend has it, eventually Peter came up with the bass line, which he played over it, and then Bernie added some lyrics. But the interesting thing was that incorporating electronic music into New Order, Peter wasn't intimidated by the fact that, you now have a sequencer playing the bass line, because he didn't play his bass in a lower octave. This was genius, because you could now use the sequencer to do the bass line, which was... and then you've got that melody over the top which goes... Obviously, I'm just demonstrating that on a piano sound, just so that you can focus more on the melodical structure of the song rather than the sounds. So with the sequencer going, Peter would allow that to, obviously, now that the sequencer was handling the sort of the lower frequencies in the bass end, Peter would come in and he played his iconic bass riff, which was... So you see how he just played that over the... And that dum 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 dum. That became sort of like a melodic element to the song. So it really was, Peter Hook revolutionized bass playing really by turning the bass into more of a melodic instrument as opposed to only a groove and a sort of bass instrument. What's also interesting, and we'll touch on this in another video, was when Blue Monday came out, it was so groundbreaking that Dave Stewart from Eurythmics, who was, you know, always wanted his music to sound really, really sort of cutting edge and current and as modern as possible, he was coming back from a studio one night apparently, and he heard New Order's Blue Monday on the radio, and that kind of pissed him off because he thought, oh my god, this is so modern. So, and as legend has it, Dave Stewart then went back to the studio and apparently redid their whole album, because after hearing Blue Monday, it did make him realize, oh my god, I'm not ahead of the curve anymore as far as the you know, technological sound is concerned. So Blue Monday really was a groundbreaking record, and it, you know, it was even Kraftwerk heard it and they became interested in it. But I don't want to be distracted by that, because guys, I do want to do a separate video on Blue Monday. But coming back to Peter Hook and the split from New Order, as I say, I think it was round about the making of the album Republic that, you know, things just got a bit difficult. And I think it's because they had that club which they were trying to fund as well. You know, they were using a lot of the money to fund that club which they'd started in Manchester. And you know, there were loads of different reasons that it didn't work. But I think it was 2007 that New Order just said, okay, we're going to call it quits. But then the sad thing is, well, the happy thing is they reformed again in 2011. The sad thing is that they reformed without Peter Hook. So that brings me on to the question: how do you feel getting rid of Peter Hook has affected New Order's sound and will obviously continue to affect in the future? Obviously, New Order have done shows recently, and obviously they get a session bass player in to play Peter Hook's parts. Of course, you can always get someone to replicate the parts of another musician, but it's not always the same. Going off topic for a moment, I know when, for instance, Guns N' Roses split up, you know, to see Axl Rose going solo without Duff and without Slash, and with, you know, once again, he'll be using great musicians to play the songs, but it's just not the same. You know, there's just a magic about having the same members. So the question is, guys, how do you feel about New Order, first of all? What other subjects within New Order would you like me to elaborate on in future videos? And how do you feel New Order is going to suffer now that Peter Hook has left? What do you think of Peter Hook? What do you think of his you know, his contribution towards not only New Order, but towards, you know, pop music in general and bass playing? If you're a bass player, I'd love to hear from you as to what you think of Peter Hook and, you know, some of the techniques that he uses to achieve his sound. Any comments you'd like to leave, feel free. There are no wrong answers here. Guys, if this is your first time to this channel, I would like to welcome you with open arms and invite you to hit the subscribe button and join the family. We also have a Vaughn George Facebook group, and I will place links to all that as well as my contact details below. And, you know, get on board and, you know, just join this like-minded, awesome community we have here. To you, my regular subscribers, love you loads. As always, thank you so much for your ongoing support, and I look forward to seeing you on the next video. Have a great day, guys.